I'm going to go live now. Now. Wonderful. We are live. I am so excited to introduce you to my wonderful colleagues from TU Technological University Dublin on this Human-Centered AI Masters webinar. This is our fourth webinar and the fourth university, part of a 10 partner consortium, European Union funded project, a fascinating project where I personally am extremely motivated to do this. I've been in artificial intelligence industry for almost a decade and a half. In the last 5-6 years, we've all been seeing tremendous pace of innovation, the speed at which data centers are adopting AI in computer vision and natural language processing. And a year ago when my colleagues at the university in Utrecht reached out to us and said we are developing a human-centered AI master's, that has ethics as a foundational stone in the middle, at the heart of this master's program, I just had to say yes. And I got to know our colleagues over this course of time, and I'm really excited to introduce you to all my colleagues here. I will start introducing you to Dr. Barry Fing, Dr. Emma Murphy, and we have Damian. All these are wonderful lecturers and professors at this beautiful university in Dublin, who I will definitely want to visit because I love that city. But I will start with the introduction. Dr. Barry Fing, tell us a little bit about yourself.
How you doing, Terry? Well, I'm delighted to be here. I'm working in computing for over 20 years now. I've been head of the Department of Computing in TU.
Well, they say you should never let old people do screaming. And this is a wonderful proof that, I crossed 50 last year. So I'll probably get some young person. Dr. Barry Fing, please proceed. My apologies for this.
No
I have thick fingers.
Don't worry at all. So, I'm in the Department of Computing for 20 years now. And the last 15 years, we've been leading it and trying to develop new programs. We've got a vast range of large ICT companies in Dublin, so it's a really exciting place to work. It's a really exciting place to team up with industry and try and understand their needs, understand their capabilities, and try and bring out students who can do that. TU Dublin is a new university, but it's formed of 3 smaller colleges around 2 years ago, and it's really exciting. We're the largest source of computer science graduates in Ireland, and we're really looking forward to this. This is a happening area. the idea now that technologists have to have a conscience and have to be ethical in their way of operation. We've always included elements of ethics in our programs, of course, professionalism and things like that. But I had a recent conversation with a leader of an SME in Dublin who does a lot of fintech AI work. And he said, up until about 18 months ago, I would have just said, show me where the money is. And if you show me the money, we'll give you the data and we'll analyze your data for you. But he says, no longer can we be like that. We have not, that's not appropriate. We've realized now the vast power that AI and processing large quantities of data has, and we've had to have a rethink on the way we're operating. So I think the European Union is really very timely with its intervention in the AI market, with its senior committees and its senior reviews of how AI is impacting on people's lives. So that's the go in it for us, Terry.
Thank you. And just to remind you guys, TU Dublin is the chief sort of project partner in this consortium. It's a 3-year program for all of you, and I'll probably keep dropping these lines because obviously the purpose is to get you guys excited to understand and to participate in the master program that we'll be launching next year in September 2022. Some universities already will be doing it probably the beginning of this year, but you can just go on our website, and it's human-centered human-centered-ai.eu, and that is a website where you have the link already on this. Dr. Emma Murphy, a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thanks, Terry, and thanks very much for inviting me today. So my research is mainly in the design and evaluation of technologies that support or are inclusive of people with disabilities and older people. So I've been working in this area of human-centered design for a long time. So I worked for the National Council for the Blind in Ireland, in what was the Centre for Inclusive Technology. So a lot of my early research explored how technology can make interfaces more accessible for blind users. So I suppose my research has really been in the area of design for people with disabilities, but more recently I've worked in the area of digital health. So the design and evaluation of interfaces, data collection and data processing for older people with chronic health conditions. So I teach data management at the moment to MSc students, and I teach data management very much through an ethical lens. So while most of my research to date is sort of working with end users, my more recent explorations have been in the area of data processing, data collection, but again, from the perspective of inclusion and sort of considering the people that we often exclude, so people with disabilities, other minority groups, race, gender. And I suppose my background is very interdisciplinary, but very much in the human-centered part. And I originally studied philosophy a long time ago.
Oh, wow.
And never really considered it that useful in my work in technology, but more recently with explorations in data ethics, it's actually been a very useful subject to have.
What a beautiful journey. Originally. Wow, Emma, this is awesome. I mean, I was talking to one of our professors, colleagues from Hungary, and I was just reminding ourselves, for instance, Jeffrey Hinton, he did his bachelor's in philosophy from Edinburgh. And then he went, obviously, because he comes from a mathematical family, and people started pushing and kicking him around, and here we are. Jeff Hinton is now, doing wonderful things in Toronto. But I think having a philosopher and a scientist makes it wonderful. I really look forward to meeting you someday, Emma, and I really would love to see you also teach and learn from you. Damian, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a pure computer scientist, I guess, although I reflect very much on what you're saying. Mathematicians and scientists and philosophers seem to go hand in hand. Newton, Leibniz, people like that. There was a great era of that. So I've been teaching computer science for about 20 years. And very often what I've found is that problems in image processing or natural language processing or AI, philosophers have written about this and kind of solved a lot of these problems 50 years ago or 100 years ago. I remember working on a problem about how to understand sentences, how to help the computer understand sentences,
Yeah.
and then happening upon Wittgenstein's work on language and going, oh, this is exactly the approach I needed. So I definitely think we have a lot to learn, and I would be very much working in the ethics side of things at the moment, and discovering and writing about philosophers like Hannah Arendt, the Prussian philosopher who talked about, I guess, totalitarian regimes, which I think we're kind of almost getting there with the larger corporations, or even John Rawls, political philosopher, who said, if you could design a system that you didn't know what part of the system you would be, that would be very good. Because I think what's happening a lot with software that's being designed is we've got young students, young graduates designing them who know that they're in charge, who know that they're the boss. So if they could only imagine themselves being the end user instead of the designer, they wouldn't call themselves grandiose names like wizards or gurus or things like that. Yeah, I think there's a whole problem around that area. I think there's a lot of interesting work. I would have a lot of parallels with Emma's career as well, in the sense that I would have worked a lot with in disability, working with the Central Remedial Clinic and Arthritis Ireland and places like that. And I sit on the board of the National Disability Authority now. We advise the government on matters about disability. So the ethical dimension is so crucial when we're considering that sort of thing.
Thank you very much. I think what a beautiful, rich, group of panelists we have. So myself and Barry, we will be kind of doing this co-hosting this seminar, but as much as we ourselves might get lost because we are so excited ourselves about this topic, we will try to obviously get to learn Emma and Damian and get to see you. And please do keep asking questions. You see that website, one of my colleagues, Christina, she also always participates. She's provided you a link here for the rest of the audience to take a look at it. Go to our website and please take a look at it. We will post this video later for those people who have not been able to participate in it live. This is live. So you have these wonderful people, you can ask them questions. Probably you may have questions around what is TU Dublin, what are the programs, can I do my master's, can I do my PhD, whatever. So we welcome you to also come to Dublin. It's a wonderful, wonderful city. So let's start with the first question. And probably I'll just start the question, and Barry, if you could help me sort of, perhaps even fine tune, reshape it. So the first question that I think the critical question that we can start with is the title. So how far can we or should we let machines make decisions in our lives? And obviously the next question will be, how do we counteract that in a most emancipated, democratic way so people learn about it? So Barry, what do you think? Is this a fair question to ask?
I think it's a fair question. I think it's an interesting perspective that Emma and Damian are bringing, because they've worked with marginalized people who've been excluded from the great IT revolution, because if you can't see the same colors as everyone else, if you can't hear the same audio as everyone else, you're excluded, and that's unfair. Okay, but now we've realized, with all our huge data and with all our huge power of processing, that AI is inadvertently excluding lots of people, the mainstream people, and excluding them from understanding the decisions being made and seeing how a decision's being made. So now what was a minority concern is something really matters to the majority. It should have always mattered to us. But as a society, sometimes we ignore marginal cases. So for example, Google, IBM, Microsoft, Amazon have all withdrawn AI-driven products and features of AI-driven products in recent years, because they've discovered that those products are not perfect. They're able to discriminate one type of person over another type of person, and they're, I guess, in danger of exposing themselves not just to ethical challenges, but also, I suppose, ultimately to financial and legal challenges, because if your system if you cannot demonstrate the ethicality of your system, you're exposing yourself then in this world, certainly in the US, where you can get a lawsuit, and in the European Union, where you'll shortly be subject to legal rebuke. So perhaps I could pass on to Damian there if you want to pick up on any of those examples.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think it's everything comes home to roost eventually, doesn't it? That's the problem with these technologies. In the 70s and 80s, when this idea of business decision support systems, where you create a tool to help people learn, were all in vogue. Even the early medical systems, like in the 70s, where you get to help doctors diagnose specific blood conditions, these were really considered revolutionary and useful and important and thoughtful, but really classified as being a support system to support the decisions taken by the expert. But now, any decision, if you fill out a form for anything at all, the chances are a computer is going to help make that decision for you, whether it's applying for a loan, whether it's a diagnosis of a medical situation, even sentencing in jails, particularly in the United States and many states. The judge has a laptop on his desk or her desk, gets recommended a sentence to give, and gives that using software that we know is racist, sexist, and discriminatory against minorities in all kinds of ways. I think it's what, for me, the most destructive element, though, is in social media. Social media companies, and in one sentence, this is what's going on with social media companies. They sell advertising. Their job is to get people to look at ads for as long as possible. They do that by provoking, enraging, angering, tricking the users into staying focused on the screen. Try to get them
sells.
A sensation sells, so addiction is what they're selling, really. They want people addicted to their phones so that they can see more advertising. So they develop these highly complex models using maybe personality models, like the big 5 personality types. They look at every click you do, how long you spend looking at a video, how long you spend looking at an image, what you like, what comments you reply to. And then they don't figure out how to help you enjoy your social media experience, figure out how to enrage you, what will trigger you to get you back on. And if you're off for too long, how they can trick you, because all they're doing is selling advertising. But they have incredibly detailed and complex psychological models of people. Unfortunately, because we're an evolved species as well, different types of people tend to behave the same way. So if I have 500,000 models of a particular kind of person, then if somebody else new joins, I know pretty much exactly how they're going to go based on my rough scoring. So we have problems now, like children who are getting plastic surgery to look more like their filters on Snapchat. It's called Snapchat dysmorphia. We have people developing physical tics and indeed psychological conditions, younger people in particular, because their brains aren't fully developed. God knows, even looking at this crowd here, our brains aren't fully developed. So we need to be, I think, parenting-wise, parents need a lot more self-defense tools, because
absolutely
this is a problem.
Perfect. And I just want to sort of maybe take the question a little bit more direction. It sounds, Emma, like, you know, when I, myself, Barry and Damian, we kind of are like helpless, and it's so reactive. Barry shared, well, you know, Europe is coming up with all these, you know, slapping fines of the rest of these people. Well, how does Facebook or Apple care if their revenues are jumping 10, 20% year over year? They'll say, throw 10 billion to those, you know, poor complaining Europeans. Give them the, you know, charity money. Let's keep building, because we are out there to global domination. So Emma, what can we do in order to be ahead of the curve and try to focus on, because we have children and all these young people also need to get jobs. They will eventually end up working for these technology companies, healthcare, whether it's healthcare AI or ethics AI, manufacturing, retail. So what do we make? What is it that we need to do in order to, you know, ensure that, you know, they don't completely take over our lives, and we kind of have this human-centered and human and machine interaction kind of an equation?
I'll try and address that. That's a big that's a big question to answer, but definitely an important one. So I think that Barry and Damian both raise really important points. First of all, Barry's point in terms of transparency, I think that is a massive part of the solution to a lot of the problems that Damian just outlined. Maybe before I try and answer, I suppose just even before we launch into all of the problems and the need for, you know, the ethical focus, I suppose something to consider in terms of AI in everyday life is, you know, there are aspects to be celebrated, you know, in terms of how, you know, we're all seamlessly using so many technologies that save us so much time, and you know, just thinking about predictive searching, maps, you know, just all of these everyday technologies that are so ingrained, you know, and I suppose when they're working well, we don't really talk about them because
exactly, because it's, you know, it's making my life easier.
Exactly. So I suppose before I suppose wanted to I suppose we need to consider both sides, because when we're talking about, you know, our current designers and engineers of technology and data scientists, so our current and future students and practitioners, you know, I suppose we need to think of both sides. So we always have to think about the benefits, but also the risks. And I think that that's what's really, you know, exciting about this master's is that it is, you know, taking both sides. So it's innovative in terms of the technology that and data science methods and models that will be covered, but also not having this big blind spot in terms of ethics and ethical procedures. And I think that it goes a long way. I think that kind of holistic model will go a long way to training future you know, practitioners in the area of data science with this understanding of ethics.
Just to follow up on Emma's point.
Go ahead, Damian, please.
I definitely think these things stream up and down as well. Once you have a master's that's looking at this topic, it seeps into undergraduate programs, it seeps into PhD programs as well. Once you've got some of the content figured out and run it a few times, it really works things out. One of the commenters asked the question, perhaps one of the issues with ethics in computer science is that it's only taught as a standalone module and should be distributed throughout. And that's exactly correct. Indeed, I just finished writing a research paper where I taught students ethical issues last year, and I asked them what they could remember this year, 9 months later, and they couldn't remember anything at all. So these things have to be repeated frequently. Particularly, I think it's easy as you get older, you have a perspective on things. When you're young, the world seems quite new and exciting, and it's hard to tell who the good guys and the bad guys are if we even want to think about it in those terms.
Sure.
I definitely think our goal, both in the masters and indeed how it's informing our undergraduate programs, is that the concept of ethics is streamed throughout. And that would align with what our professional organizations tell us, but also aligns a lot with research. We need to keep hammering home this message and let students see it from lots of different perspectives. Data is a big one. AI is a big one. There's lots of easy examples we can think about as well, though, and lots of useful ways to discuss it. I definitely think, as I said before, the philosophers had a lot of these issues figured out, though. So we need a good understanding of what philosophers have talked about, because they have good answers to think about, and that's, I think, crucially where the area of ethics really scaffolds and supports the human-centeredness to make the human important again, because I think we did get so excited with the technology that it's time to bring the person back.
I might come in for a second, Terry, and just say,
please,
we're really excited by the group we've assembled for this particular master's program. We've engaged with a lot of people in a lot of different companies, major ICT players, such as IBM, such as Dell, such as Amazon, such as Microsoft, such as Google, and they've been quite open and discursive with us in talking about the needs for graduates with more of an ethical awareness and more ethical competence, but not just theoretical philosophical underpinnings, how to turn that into reality. So that if I'm an SME that's looking to hire a graduate, and if I want to use AI, in my product, can I get someone who really understands the ethical implications, the trustworthy, the openness implications? So that's the challenge we've set us. The universities are all technological style universities that are engaged in this. They're used to producing graduates who work in the industry. We're fortunate in our colleagues from Budapest. They're leading an AI group in Hungary. We're fortunate with our Italian partners who are very experienced, and of course, being Italy, they have some excellent philosophers working in their university.
Really, yes, absolutely.
And the Dutch partners, the Dutch university partners, have a human-centered AI research team and group. So and then nimble SMEs like your own, and startups like your own, Terry. We're really excited by the mix we have. We want to give people the real skills so they can produce real products using current technologies, but with an ethical flavor and ethical capacity. And I think that'll give a real edge in the marketplace. It's all about incentives. In our program, you won't get your master's thesis corrected properly unless you've dealt with the ethical aspects.
Right.
We'll make that a rule. And the same way the European Union's making it a rule, you can't use your AI unless you've done a risk assessment and unless you've understood the implications for human beings. We set the incentives the right way, and graduates of this program will have an advantage. And I'm sure we'll look back in 10 years' time and say, well, weren't we a little naive in some of the assumptions and some of the content we've made? But we're setting out like new explorers, and we're hoping to have really good integrated content across a range of specializations.
Wonderful, Barry. So I think that is, first of all, thank you for also, because it's all about our master's program that we kind of have quite interesting discussions. The wonderful philosophers in Italy, but it's not confined to any region. We've spoken to great people, our colleagues in Hungary as well, computer scientists who chose philosophy, human sciences, and I have Emma. I was so fascinated with her introduction, and Damian's passion as well. Spending decades doing this, it's actually, I kind of see that our consortium is, and obviously I'm biased because I'm proud of our consortium, but it's kind of like a miniaturized version of the world where there is a factory that needs to produce these graduate students or postgraduate students who should be able to find work. Then, these are large enterprises who have supported us in this consortium, big companies like NVIDIA, one of the largest retailer, Ahold in the Netherlands. So they understand the importance of ethics for sure. In terms of questions, would it be okay if I start posting questions? Because I believe there are people, I believe someone knows you as well, Damian. He's asked a question, but let me just go to the first question. John M. I don't know who the gentleman is. But probably this question, and let's spend like 2 minutes each, starting with Barry, and then Emma and Damian.
So that first question, it gets at a key point, which is sometimes we decide we're worried about, maybe it's innovation, or we're worried about, maybe it's safety for children, or maybe this time it's ethics and philosophy. So we give someone that responsibility and we send them off on their own, and we don't integrate them into the rest of the community. So we've ticked the box, we've addressed the concern. That's not what we're doing in this program here. We're integrating into the assessment, and we're integrating across the modules, the ethics and the IT. It's something actually that Damian and Emma have been working on another small European project. I shouldn't call it small, but a European project. How to create ethical content for ICT programs. Damian is showing his banner there. I might let him in next there. Just
perfect. Follow us on Twitter. The project.
But you're interjecting with great passion and exuberance. So go ahead.
Definitely, in terms of integrating, I definitely agree with Barry. The key win will be where we don't even say the word ethics anymore. It's just that's a thing you tick. So when we design software, the certain things we think about: accessibility, usability, how easy it is to use for other people. the ethics of it should be just another thing on the list that when we do a design process, whatever approach we take, and there's different approaches to writing software, if there's a way that ethics goes into it without even having to think about it, I do believe the principal problem is you've younger people who are a bit egocentric still. That's not, their brains are still developing. So in their 20s, it's hard for them to see other people as being different. They view themselves as the norm. They view their views, political views or social views, as normal. So then they believe if they build software, it's for everyone. There's nothing malicious about it. It's just genuinely naive. So then if you ask them, well, how would somebody in this category use it? They go, oh, I didn't really think of that. And then you say to them, well, do you not have any family members at home in this category? And they go, oh, yeah, of course I do. But so it's just to get them out of their own heads and design for more people. If I was to speak in marketing terms, the wider demographic you have, the more customers you're going to have. So if we can design software that's ethical, that means it's going to be more usable by more people. Plus, we need to think about the environmental impact of some of the issues we're going to think about and talk about. We know we have data centers that suck up a lot of juice, computational processes that suck up a lot of juice. There's a thought that Ireland might have blackouts because we have so many data centers.
That's an infrastructure question. Let me just kind of try to sort of help. And it is, I mean, yesterday I was at a data center because we are moving our AI compute capacity as well to local data center. And me and my CEO are there, and he was so proud to talk about his data center. And I was thinking, oh God, in the next 5 years, Facebook is coming to in the center of the Netherlands, Zeewolde, and they have bypassed, the government and the local officials have bypassed these sort of electric needs for 23,000 people in that little village. And now there's let's see how the network, the energy provider starts to dash in their pants when they realized that Facebook said, we will build our own electric sort of generation capacity. And they were like, what the dash is happening? So I think it's a power play is a different game. Emma, when we are looking to integrate, I know you spent like decades and you worked with this human machine interaction, disability. How do we integrate it in a practical way? Because obviously I'm super keen to do this. We'll be doing workshops and hackathons throughout this master's program. But we want to bring some use cases that actually land, as Damian just rightly mentioned. Because even if you're like 20-something person, we want it to land in your mind and it stays, that was a use case. That's the perfect job for me. I want to get into healthcare. I want to get into disability or some other startup that is actually focusing on people with mental or physical disability. How do we integrate it in such a way that it becomes impactful for young people to remember for a longer period?
I think coming back to the question in terms of integration, I think, that problem of looking at ethics as a sort of process. Say if we take, for example, research and research ethics, usually we create our technology, we design our experiment, we think about who we're going to include, and then we go through this ethics process that's going to slow us down. And the way that we think sometimes about ethics is just another process that we have to go through, whereas we really need to start embedding ethics into the entire innovation. So whether it is in the design of an AI model or the entire system that it's going to sit in, we need to think from the beginning to really encourage students and any designer that it's good to find ethical risks. And actually it will enhance your design when you start thinking about how you're going to mitigate for them. But more importantly, it's going to save you creating an entire system or process that at the end you realize has some, terrible feature that excludes or discriminates against people. In terms of how to get the buy-in from students and designers in terms of, why this human-centered approach is so important. There are so many tools and techniques, I think, from the area of human-centered design thinking. So idea of, well, first of all, where you can, to bring in, people who are experts in their own capabilities and requirements. So if you're talking about people with disabilities, bring people in, stakeholder, user organizations, but also use things like personas, scenarios, storyboards to really bring users to life within a classroom. So I think when you bring these kind of ideas in early and you get people on board, it's an easy buy-in, I think, because it's just opening people's minds and considering perspectives that they genuinely, as Damian said, it's not out of malice. It's just people genuinely have not encountered people with other capabilities or
Fascinating, Emma. I really hope, and I know that you will be participating. At least I hope. In any case, I will reach out to you, because this is such a fascinating topic. Because you are right, and I've said that in many of sort of conversations that I've had outside this consortium as well with industry partners. Is if you make it exciting enough, you build the right technology aspects into, you don't need to interrogate companies and slapping fines. You can interrogate your systems, because your eventual goal is to reach a larger demographic. Because eventually the Western European or Northwestern demographic of the world, where the large majority data sets have been built on, is not going to get you into expanding regions in Africa, in China, multilingual sort of aspects, and transferability already are showing that these models are inherently super weak. So I think this is fascinating. And design principles is exactly, when you started using those terms, I was like, in my mind, it was going like bing, 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 bing. Emma really gets it. Barry, is there something you want to add to that? You already added the question. Probably let me ask Barry if you can take this question. I know this is specifically from John. Apparently he knows Damian, but maybe Barry, could you very briefly answer this question, and we'll let Damian then answer.
This is a very interesting question. I mean, John is saying that the financial sector is heavily regulated already, and so it is. But at the same time, IBM have turned down business and Google have turned down business from banking customers because they were concerned that the technology they would have been giving their customer, they couldn't guarantee its independence, transferability, and its transparency, and they couldn't guarantee how the decisions would be made. And that's the problem with a lot of decisions. If I'm not going to get a loan from the bank, I'd like to know why. And I'd like to know if it's because I live in a particular part of town, or if it's genuinely based on my merits as an individual and my likelihood to pay back. So it's a highly regulated area, but even with that highly regulated area, and of course, we thought banking was regulated 10 or 15 years ago before there was a huge collapse. Even in a highly regulated area, there can be practices that are, when light is shone upon them, that are very, very dubious. I guess the European Union is going with risk-based assessment first, which is if it's affecting an individual's health, if it's affecting an individual's human rights, their legal rights, or if it has a major impact on a human's life, that's the place first to look at the ethical AI. That's how we're handling it. And that's what we'll be teaching in the program.
Perfect. Damian.
John, thanks a million for the question. I absolutely agree with Barry. I think fundamentally the fact that the European Union had to say, your AI should be explainable, you should know how the decisions are being made in it, is kind of scary. I think we've already bought too far into it by that. And just to go on to the collection from data wearables, I think that's a really fascinating area. So there was a big movement 10 years ago, the quantified self, where people would wear sensors and Fitbits and all these devices. There have been absolutely hilarious outcomes of that. For example, a lot of American bases in Iran or Iraq, the soldiers would run around the bases all day long for training to keep fit. So all the Al-Qaeda groups had to do was hack into the Fitbit site, and they get a perfect map of where the ammunition dump is, where everything is on the bases, because they'd run around in square shapes or round shapes. Just looking at all of the data. So it is unbelievable the amount of data that people share. Anytime you have a device on, if you have a smart speaker at home, you might as well assume everything you're saying is being recorded. If you have a smartphone, you might as well assume, even if you turn off location tracking, that your location is being tracked, because that's probably the right way of doing it. There is so much data, and these organizations need so much data to generate this digital avatar, this representation of you, so they can do goofy stuff with it. So I think that's a regrettable outcome. And again, to follow up on Emma's point again, there's no malice in any of this at all. It's simply they want to sell advertising. So they're trying to do their best job at marketing that, but the quality, the approach they're taking to marketing is so good that it's too persuasive. It goes beyond advertising into a whole area of persuasion, I think.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, my internet is going out now, so I'm going to sign off now. Thanks a million, guys.
Thank you, Damian. Thank you very much. I don't know what happened, but Damian's internet, apparently he's paying by the hour. But again, I mean, well, that's great. I mean, then he's not hooked, that we know. So for those who are hooked, there's a beautiful question. Maybe Emma, I have this question from Yanis Stavrakakis.
I know Yanis.
And he's asking this question. I think it relates to your answer you had just given previously. And he's probably challenging the feasibility and how realistic it is. And I think it's a fair question.
So, Yanis, you're asking, so in terms of decision-making and ethics, of putting the teaching of ethical reasoning as the primary goal of computer ethics classes, especially in computer science, be a feasible and realistic goal? Yeah, I mean, I think this human-centered master's is really, breaking ground, I suppose, in this area of, that everything is not completely siloed in terms of the human-centered content and the technical content. With the Ethics for You project, which Yanis is working on, there's lots of really great ideas in how we can incorporate ethics into the curriculum. And I think it is. I think it absolutely is feasible to certainly incorporate it and not have it siloed. Whether the teaching of ethical reasoning is the primary goal of computer ethics classes, I don't know. I think they're interesting.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind coming in for a second, and I think the question is the opposite question. Can we afford not to teach people ethics? The reality is ICT power is all pervasive in our lives now. Yeah. And we have brilliant technological professionals. We have brilliant technological people who can, if you give them a problem, they are brilliant at coming up with a solution. If you say, here's a problem, can you give me a solution? My problem is I want more people to look at this site. I want more people to use this site. But sometimes they're so busy with the technology, they forget about whether they should do that in the first place. And that's a question now that I think a conversation with Ben Zevenbergen from Google's ethical team, they're trying to pose the question to themselves, should they do a piece of capability before they actually start doing it? Because technological people can be brilliant problem solvers, but we can't have a situation where they're saying, well, I made it, but I didn't think about the implications of making it. I was only following the direction of someone else. That's something that we have to equip people. These are very powerful skills we're giving people. We have to equip them to understand these decisions.
Absolutely. And I have this question from Merv. Merv is one of our, fortunately, she's accepted the position as our advisory board member. And I believe she's not asking a question, but probably is a very good question, or at least a statement she's put out here. She is also a founder of AI Ethicists and participates in many consortia around the world. And I'm very glad to have you here more in our AI Masters program. And let me just read it out for you, Emma. So what she's saying is we need ethics classes and AI fundamentals classes to be integrated. Not only should engineers understand the societal or socio-technological impacts, but also the social scientists need to understand the fundamentals of the system. So both parties need to do something to get to know each other.
Yeah.
And we need to create kind of a shared language. And I know it's a super difficult task. In the 90s, I guess people didn't care about it. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, Merv. That's exactly. I think that, you know, towards working towards a solution for these, you know, some of the problems in terms of bias and exclusion, I think that a multidisciplinary approach is really needed. So, you know, we have these experts, you know, so we're saying, you know, we have these experts in AI and machine learning, but we also have experts who are working in social sciences, as Merv has identified. And, you know, sometimes when we look at these examples, say, particularly in discrimination, bias, exclusion, you know, recently there was a skincare app that was released that didn't work on darker skin. I mean,
Exactly.
you know, how can this happen now? You know, and if, you know, that has nothing to do with data protection law, that's basic discrimination. And we have laws that deal with discrimination we have had for a long time. So I think, you know, the answer is absolutely in the collaboration across disciplines, and often the answer is nothing new. It's available and has been worked on in, you know, the field of social science for a long time. But we actually just need to get people together into the same room. And I think that, you know, this master's will go a long way in terms of creating graduates that have this level of interdisciplinarity, so that, you know, you can actually, you need to be able to understand what's going on in the technology, but you also have to have this wider societal understanding. And I think that involving people who work across disciplines will be really important, actually, for allowing the communication of experts within different fields.
We'll be taking an approach. I mean, what happens naturally in academic programs is we put a collection of experts and we give them a module, and they'll go off and they'll, you know, put it up on the whiteboard, and they'll explain and discourse and leave it at that. And they don't always interact with each other. You know, that's just a reality of how academic programs are delivered. But we're a technological university, so we like to interact with the industry. It's messier, it's harder. We like to interact with different quantities at the same time. So we will be including in our review panel for our research projects an insistence on an ethical element, and that element is dealt with. We'll insist on it. We put the incentives into the program to try and stop that natural boxing. As a human being, you can't look after all the world all the time. You like to look after your direct concerns, and academics can be like that too. But we'll try to make sure the culture of the program allows for that proper interaction and that proper discourse across the areas. And you've seen some element of the team. I'm very confident in the team we have nationally and internationally in delivering this program. They're an open, engaged, forward-looking team. So I think that will help to address that.
I think a collective effort absolutely is required. You know, European Union obviously is doing its best, and they're putting in hundreds of billions of dollars in those Horizon programs to try to bring digital skills and the ability for our citizens and residents, and I should say residents in Europe, that's how they sort of measure the impact that people have with 500 people in this region, to have a balanced approach towards technology and human-centered. If I were to ask you, like, last question, because, you know, we're running out of time, 10 years from now, and I will start with Emma, and then Barry, you can have the last word. 10 years from now, so we are right now in 2021, 2030. Where do you guys think we will be? Would we have, and try to give you a little, maybe influence your answer, would we have forgotten ethics because we got so overwhelmed with all the positive effects of AI in space research and medicine? And you've seen, you know, AlphaFold, so many things are happening, new startups are coming just because DeepMind's research. Do you think we will again forget about ethics, or do you think in 10 years of time we would have a more balanced approach where software will be developed? Where do you think we will be in either of these? Do you think? What is your sort of prediction for the future?
I would be hopeful that that sort of trust and an ethical an ethical sort of brand will be really appealing for companies. So as one of the questions came in, in terms of the, finance industry, digital health, all personal trackers, I think recently people who never really had questions about data are starting to become more aware of what happens to their data. I think those concerns are becoming much more mainstream, and I think that is driving a demand for particularly large organizations, but all industries. There is a value in being a trusted brand, and I think that, as in terms of the commission and regulations, they will be developed. So it will become more regulated. But I think more importantly, the idea of buying into building in trust and ethics into your organization. I think that is going to be a really strong driver, and I would hope that, and I do believe that in 10 years' time, it probably will still be an issue, but hopefully, the kinds of issues that we're having now will be resolved through regulation, and also this sort of push for having trust and ethics.
Very hopeful. Barry, what do you think? I know it's not the answer is never binary. I know.
The answer isn't binary. For me, this is a battle for the type of world we want to live in. Okay, and it's really important issues. Passionate people like Emma and Damian are on the side of, being honest, good, open with people. I think that technology is the way that's the type of technology, the world I want to live in. Yeah. But I don't think we can take for granted that we let somebody else look after that and that will happen. I think a lot of engaged people have to invest. I'm hoping that the people who come to do this program and who are people who are really sensitive to the ideas of technology for good for humanity and for all of humanity, not just for a select few. And I'm hoping that we'll help to fill that need and champion that cause for technology.
Very hopeful indeed, and indeed, as you rightly said, Barry, it's not about we should and let's try. No, it's about doing it, and I'm happy, and we are excited to be participating with in this consortium with TU Dublin, University in Utrecht, Budapest University, and University of Naples, and some wonderful startups in Ireland and in Italy, and research centers as well. A fantastic research center in Ireland and in Italy. So, in doing our parts is the only way to actually do the course correction, I believe, to whatever extent that we can make that little dent and be the world, as you rightly and very wisely said, Barry, what kind of a world do you want to live in? I want to live in a world with people I can trust, and not each and every fleeting sort of glance is being calculated at pixel value, but at a more human-centered value. Thank you so much. For all the audience, this is our website. We will be doing some wonderful stuff. There'll be revamping going on. All these wonderful interactions will come in the website. Next year, it's going to be fascinating as we bring in our workshops, hopefully getting Emma and Damian and all these fantastic, researchers and scientists participating in wonderful workshops and hackathons to actually give you answers, as you asked Yannis, how to make things practical, how to let people actually feel what actually ethics is, quantifying ethics and not just thinking about it that someone is being abused. So let's raise a flag and go to, I don't know, Brussels and have an activist agenda, but solve it technologically. Thank you, Emma. I really appreciate it. Damian, I know you're now trying to again build your bucket of internet for the next week. So I'll definitely would love to meet you. And Barry, thank you very much for helping co-host this. Everybody, have a wonderful week. Thanks, everybody. And please go on this website, take a look at it, ask us questions. We're here to help you and get yourself enrolled. Already start planning for your enrolling in your master's program.
Thanks, Terry.
Thanks, everybody.
Your passion shines.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Perfect. Take care. Bye. God bless, and talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.